on a night that at one point was set to be the date for the first ever WWF draft, with each leading a brand as the exclusive top guys on Raw and SmackDown. Rock and Austin opened 2002 with the first Raw of the year coming from Madison Square Garden in a tag match against Booker and Bossman to open Raw's second hour, doing the show's biggest viewership gain with over 700,000 viewers to the peak quarter of the night 5.3 rating, which was also both's highest rated segment of the month, with the build-up to the Rumble pay-per-view seeing Rock in a title feud against Jericho and Austin as one of the Rumble favorites along with Undertaker and Angle, as the loaded card for the show, which also included Ric Flair's WWF in-ring return after a decade and a first-ever match against Vince McMahon, ending up doing one of the top 2 biggest Rumble pay-per-views in history with over 670,000 buys. In the head-to-head rating comparisons with both after the January 7th Raw working in separate programs, Rock was involved in the peak rating of the night on every show he was on for both Raw and SmackDown going in and coming off the Rumble pay-per-view, including on the Go Home show on January 17th, which saw the company give away Triple H's return match on TV after over 8 months teaming with Austin against Angle and Booker in the main event, as the Rock promo at the top of the hour hyping up the Rumble, followed by a confrontation with Jericho 3 days from their title match, saw the segment drawing the peak of the night 4.2 rating, with Rock also peaking the post-Rumble Raw on January 21st with the main event tag match of Rock and Hunter against Angle and Jericho doing a 5.1 rating.
Heading into Mania, and it's Rock versus Hogan. Well, that's the big match, that's the main event. Stone Cold Steve Austin's going to work with Scott Hall. And so, I mean, all due respect and props to him, but, you know, Hogan was the guy that I needed to work with.
You know, the original plan was we were going to beat Austin, and then Hogan would lose to Rock, but we would come down and beat Rock, you know, beat him up afterwards, get some heat on him.
The original finish for WrestleMania 18 was that Hulk was going to do a job for Rock, and then Austin was going to do a job for me with Kev on the outside. Mm-hmm. The night before the show in Toronto, Vince summoned me, Hulk, and Kev to his suite in the hotel and wanted to discuss the finish, which I thought was kind of weird because we had talked about it nearly 5 months earlier.
How do you feel about headlining one more WrestleMania with The Rock? Oh my God!
After teasing a potential Mania main event title match between them on the SmackDown before the Rumble pay-per-view, Rock and Austin walked away without the belt or the Rumble title shot to set the stage for a bigger program, with Hogan, Hall and Nash signing with the WWF to make the dream scenario of a Rock and Austin vs NWO feud a reality as the headline program to WrestleMania 18. But with things heating up behind the scenes just as they did in front of the camera. As with Rock the original choice to face Hogan as the clear pay-per-view headliner, Steve Austin was put in an unfamiliar position since his rise to the top, being forced to play second fiddle heading into the biggest event of the year, with major mainstream promotion across the board building the Rock vs Hogan clash as the match to determine who goes down as the greatest of all time, kicking off the road to WrestleMania on February 18th in one of the all-time memorable Raws in show history, highlighted by a strong contender for the greatest segment in wrestling television history, with Hogan and Rock going face-to-face for the first time to set up the dream match in front of a hot crowd in Chicago, spiking over 1.4 million viewers to Raw's highest quarter of the year 5.3 rating, with the overall second hour on the night, which featured the nearly 40-minute Rock vs NWO angle, drawing around 7 million viewers. The most watched hour of Raw since August 2001, as with the Hogan-Rock match officially set, Rock was written off TV with the truck ambulance attack angle to give him time off from the road after reportedly having no days off throughout January and early February, driving back and forth between shooting extra scenes for the Scorpion King movie to the WWF TV tapings, with Rock saying that it would be pretty much impossible to balance both full-time on a long-term basis. As with Rock off for the following 2 weeks, the Austin vs Scott Hall and NWO feud dominated TV in the following weeks, with the first show after the hot Raw seeing SmackDown on February 21st jump big to a 6-month high 4.5 rating, featuring a show-long Austin vs. NWO chase that peaked at a Big 5 rating on network television for the main event angle, with Austin and Hall starting a series of matches on the road, with their first match taking place on February 23 in Buffalo, with Austin having his biggest number of the month on Raw 2 days later in the main event against Curt Hennig, followed by a post-match NWO attack doing a 4.8 rating.
You can't ever walk off the job like this. So he had the history of this happening the day after WrestleMania. I just chalked up the fact that he was burned out. That's what he said.
Rock returned to the ring on March 1 at the Yokohama Arena in Japan for a Big 3 show tour in Asia, headlining in 3 title matches against Chris Jericho, all drawing sold-out crowds of 11,000 to 16,000 people, with Rock back on Raw on March 11 for the first time since the first Hogan segment in the go-home show for WrestleMania, giving away perhaps the match with the biggest star power in wrestling history, featuring the 3 biggest stars in industry history and the most influential tag team in its biggest ever boom period, all in the same match, jumping over 900,000 viewers to a peak 5.2 rating, with the day after the pay-per-view seeing both Austin and Rock making headlines for different reasons, with Austin feeling burned out and after recently not liking his positioning on the TV product, especially on the Mania pay-per-view card itself, with his match with Hall placed 5th from the top, walked out unannounced on the Raw after Mania, with him flying home without telling anybody. While on the Raw broadcast in another all-time great TV, Rock and Hogan opened the show in a 25-minute segment in front of one of the hottest crowds of all time from Montreal against Hall and Nash, setting several rating milestones for the year, with their opening segment doing a 5.5 rating to make it the highest rated quarter on Raw in 7 months, while the Rock and Hogan vs. Outsiders main event tagged it a 5.8 rating in the overrun to also make it the highest rated segment since August 2001, as 7 days from the first ever draft episode, with the plan for months being Rock and Austin each leading a brand as the top guys. Austin's status for the show was in question, with him ending up again not appearing on the show, which saw Rock drafted at number 1. Leaving Austin's selection to be determined in a TV angle scheduled for Raw the next week, with Rock on the draft show after confronting Vince earlier in the night, working a tag match with Hogan against the NWO, drawing a 5.7 rating, topping the 5.5 from the previous week as the highest rated quarter on Raw since August. Austin returned on April 1 to officially make him an exclusive Raw performer, with the intrigue of how the shows would do with separate rosters, with Rock and Austin as originally planned since the first time the draft idea came up, going head-to-head on different brands, in addition to the unique situation of having the almost consensus Mount Rushmore of wrestling in Hogan, Rock, Austin and Flair all working full-time to head the 2 TV programs, with the results of the first 2 weeks showing positive signs as both shows remained strong, with viewers showing initial intrigue in the new concept coming off the huge audience watching the draft episode, with the first week of April seeing the ideal scenario with both shows headlined by Rock and Austin to strong numbers, with Rock vs. Chris Jericho headlining SmackDown while Austin's decision segment with Flair and McMahon headlined Raw, resulting in SmackDown having a 6.7 to 6.6 million viewers lead over Raw in the first official week, but with that ideal scenario being cut short just as it started, with the April 4th SmackDown being Rock's last WWF TV appearance before going on a massive media tour to promote the release of the Scorpion King, leading to SmackDown immediately taking a major hit with numbers dropping over the next few weeks, while Raw, headed by Austin's feud with Flair, Taker and the NWO, remained strong above the 6 million viewers range, and for the first time in months led Raw to outdraw SmackDown in total viewers on a consistent basis, with Austin's biggest segment of the month being the Flair-McMahon decision on April 1 doing a 5.7 rating, with him overall involved in 4 of the 5 peak segments on Raw during the month, mainly in opposition to Ric Flair and Scott Hall doing numbers between 5 to 5.7 rating.
Rock, I mean, are you still a wrestler who acts? Are you now an actor who wrestles?
That's a good question.
With him now not expected on WWF television until close to the summer, Rock had the biggest media tour for any wrestler in history in the lead up to the debut of his first lead role in the Scorpion King, making every major talk show on radio and television along with all major written publications on the way to the release on April 19th, with the massive hype for the movie leading to it opening at record levels with the highest grossing opening for a movie in history during the month of April, further establishing Rock's mainstream star power and elevating his status in Hollywood to already have several major offers for the next year, with Rock returning to the ring on May 4th in a rare non-televised match from Fort Lauderdale near his hometown, teaming with Hogan against Angle and Jericho to draw one of the biggest house show crowds of the year with over 12,000 people, while 2 days later Austin headlined the first ever WWE Raw in the six-man tag match with Flair and Bradshaw against the NWO that saw Flair turning heel on Austin, drawing a peak 5 rating. As starting the following week, the Austin vs. Flair feud that was mainly responsible for holding Raw steady since the brand split, noticeably cooled off along with the entire show in general, with Raw dropping below the 4 rating range for the rest of the month for the first time since the early stages of the boom period in early '98, and with Austin growing more frustrated by the week with his management and creative dispute continuing from the past several months. May 31st saw things escalating to new highs.
The bottom line is everything sucks. I'm not happy with the direction Stone Cold Steve Austin's going. I ain't happy with the direction the whole company's going. I think the writing has been pretty substandard. I'll go one better than that. It's been piss poor. I guess if that pisses some people off, then that's just the way it is.
Well, again, you know,
I think it could have been a hell of a lot better creative than it's been going on. It's pretty as a matter of fact, and I ain't been happy with what I've been doing before WrestleMania or after WrestleMania as we speak presently.
In an almost unprecedented situation for a top WWF performer while still under contract, Steve Austin heavily criticized the creative direction of the company on the Bite This Internet talk show on the WWE website, talking publicly for the first time on what has been rumored for months with him not liking the positioning of his character in the pecking order along with the new more structured creative process, with Vince McMahon on the same show the following week responding to Austin's comments, saying that Austin is perhaps the most demanding performer he has ever worked with, and using a music analogy that sometimes he's gonna be producing gold albums instead of platinum. As with the issue looked to reach its peak with the Austin-McMahon public exchange before being resolved internally, it ended up just setting the stage for what's to come 3 days later.
He took his ball and went home, and obviously I'm pissed off.
On the creative end, I mean, it's really burying me, dogging me with some really stupid stuff that didn't make sense. You know, if that's going to happen, you know, I'm not going to be there. You need to change it.
They wanted you to lose to some chump?
Yeah, in a no build-up match, you know. We're trying to work on a kid and build him up. Stone Cold Steve Austin is not the first victim you feed him, I'm the last.
After getting the word on the creative plans for Raw on Monday, June 10th, Steve Austin, after 2 phone conversations with JR and Vince on Sunday night, flew back home to San Antonio after arriving in Atlanta hours before Raw went on the air, walking out on the company for the second time in 3 months to essentially end his full-time wrestling career, with the plans laid out to him by both Ross and McMahon being a first-time ever Austin vs. Lesnar match that would see Brock going over after several interferences to continue to build him up to the main event. As Austin, after his public criticism of the creative team with the feeling that perhaps he's being intentionally sabotaged as a response, refused to do the match with only 2 hours of hype with no build-up or special promotion, but with the bigger issue going back to a similar situation of the first time he walked out after playing second fiddle to Rock and Hogan throughout the road to WrestleMania 18. As with Rock scheduled to headline SummerSlam against Lesnar for the title, Austin's final straw was feeling that he's being used as a stepping stone to build the Rock vs. Brock match when feeling that he should be his final opponent headlining the pay-per-view, leading to a never-seen-before public burial of a contractual top star, with a furious Vince and JR telling the story on the Confidential show on Saturday night on June 15th. With the Austin headlines on the day starting already in the morning, with police being called to his home to close a week that Austin probably would like to erase the most from his career.
Take this with you. Oh, look out! Austin can take his ball and go home. As far as I'm concerned, this is home.
While the Austin-McMahon-Ross drama was developing over the weekend, Rock on the same Saturday was back in the ring for the first time since the Hogan tag in early May, headlining a special SmackDown house show in Honolulu, Hawaii against Chris Jericho. In a show that Rock called the most meaningful of his career due to growing up in the area and with his grandfather Peter Maivia's history in the territory. As the moment Rock was advertised, the company sold out the Blaisdell Arena in record time with a massive ticket demand that could have sold out a stadium. With the chaos and uncertainty of the past week leading to a major call from McMahon, with Rock, who was originally scheduled to make his return on July 11th to start the build to SummerSlam while being an exclusive SmackDown performer, getting the call from Vince to ask him to make a special appearance on Raw on June 17th, with Rock arriving to the building in Oakland approximately 15 minutes before going to the ring to avoid any chance of it being reported, coming out to a massive reaction to cut an all-time memorable promo designed as a morale-lifting speech to viewers and the company, along with some planned shots at Austin for walking out to officially write him off television and move on to the pay-per-view on Sunday, with Austin, as he would confirm a few months later, was watching Rock's speech as it happened along with the rest of what he called the smear campaign against him, planning to respond at a later date, with Rock's unadvertised promo taking place already past 11 p.m. to gain over 800,000 viewers to Raw's highest-rated segment in a month 4.8 rating. Rock returned full-time on July 11th to build to a title match against Angle and Taker at Vengeance, and a day after the pay-per-view which saw Rock winning the WWF title for a record 7-time and a strong contender for the greatest three-way match in history, along with the intrigue coming from the debut of Eric Bischoff a week earlier. Rock drove Raw to its highest-rated show in months with a 4.3 rating on the back of the two highest-rated segments on the night, bumping the show over 1 million viewers, first with his title win promo followed by a confrontation and main event match against Eddie Guerrero doing 4.7 and 4.8 ratings, and from that point on Rock was involved in the peak rating of the night on every single Raw and SmackDown show on the way to the SummerSlam pay-per-view, with the company gradually heating up on the way to the event, with Raw jumping back into the 4 rating range, as Rock's peak numbers included a first-time ever match against Ric Flair, singles matches against Angle, Benoit and Hunter, and several tag matches involving Edge, Eddie and Benoit, while building up the Rock vs. Brock SummerSlam main event, peaking 3 days before the show with the go-home segment for the pay-per-view featuring a Rock and Edge vs. Eddie and Benoit tag match, followed by the first Rock Lesnar confrontation after being kept apart throughout the entire build-up, drawing over 7 million viewers heading into the pay-per-view, which ended up with over 500,000 domestic buys, the most successful non-WrestleMania event in the brand extension era. While on the way to the show, Rock headlined one of the biggest non-televised events in company history, drawing over 60,000 for the Global Warning Stadium show in Melbourne, Australia, meaning that between the pay-per-view buys for the Rumble through WrestleMania 18 followed by Vengeance to SummerSlam, along with the international tours of Asia, Hawaii and Australia, Rock, despite only working around 5 months of the year, headlined every single major money event in 2002.
It doesn't matter where The Rock has come back to. Sing along with The Rock is over.
With the common knowledge of him leaving again after SummerSlam to film the Rundown movie, Rock, who just elevated Brock's status in one match from a green rookie to a main event player, got a mixed reaction at the Nassau Coliseum, which led to him spontaneously taking the microphone after the pay-per-view went off the air to play off the crowd reaction, encouraging the response before saying that Sing Along with The Rock is over, in his final appearance for the year, planting the seeds for what's to come next in 2003, as with Vince McMahon building the entire brand split on the idea of having the deepest and biggest star power talent roster in history headed by Rock and Austin, each leading a brand. Vince instead ended up in rebuilding mode by the end of the year, with most of the top drawing performers in March either gone from the company or off television for different reasons by December.
When Jim Ross set up the meeting, it was just me and Vince in High Rise Hotel in Houston, Texas, because that's where the Raw was. I mean, he leans forward, he goes, "What happened?"
And I hear some of these candy-ass imposter jabronis. I got some things going on in my head. We'll see when I come back.
I told him that, and it wasn't just a wrestling promo on SmackDown. Just so you guys know, are you clearly prepared to go where we're going to go when you start booing me? Because we'll have a fun ride, don't get me wrong.
But, you know, you can't expect the Rock that you're going to get. I mean, it's going to be, now everything is just going to be taken to a different level that you're not used to. And having a good time while doing it.
After being contacted by JR to set it up, the first face-to-face meeting of Austin and Vince took place in an hotel room in Houston to set up Austin's return, while at the same time Rock was preparing for his return in a new character playing off the SummerSlam crowd response, subtly turning heel in a series of promos via satellite before making his return in Indianapolis on February 20th to pretty much ask the crowd if they're sure they want him to turn, knowing the consequences, playing the crowd and turning on Hogan less than an hour later to officially cement him as a heel going into the rematch in Montreal, as the No Way Out pay-per-view, which saw the in-ring return of Rock, Austin and Hogan all on the same show, drew over 450,000 buys to make it the biggest B pay-per-view in the brand split era by a big margin, with the next day on Raw seeing Rock making a surprise appearance confronting the Toronto crowd and starting the build-up to the third Rock vs. Austin WrestleMania match, cutting an all-time great promo to open Raw before continuing for the next 2 hours to put on one of the greatest one-man show performances of all time, which also included a backstage segment with Hurricane and a main event battle royal, leading Raw to jump back into the 4 rating range, as with all the hype set for next week for Austin's TV return and a promoted Rock Austin confrontation. Austin, in a Shoot magazine interview, gave his full side of the story on what happened over the past year that saw him walking out twice, in the process criticizing the company burying him in a deliberate campaign in June 2002, and responding back to Rock's speech on June 17 that saw him taking several shots at Austin in a message to the rest of the locker room, saying that he was blindsided by Rock's promo as his problem was not with Rock but with Vince and the company's direction, with Rock a few days after the talked about performance on Raw in Toronto appearing on Bite This to hype the upcoming confrontation with Austin on Monday while responding to his comments in the magazine interview.
What about the comments of Stone Cold Steve Austin in the issue of Raw magazine, Rock? He was very critical of you. JR was mentioning that before, that Austin.
He was critical of me, and he said exactly what he meant to say. And here's the thing. The counter to that is I said exactly how I felt. When I came back, I flew in as a surprise, and I went to Raw. It was in Oakland, and the funny thing was when I hear different things from different people saying, well, we understand that you had to say what you had to say, and you were given dialogue. Well, let me wisen some people up. Sure, I'm given dialogue. Work very closely with our writing team. But at the same time, I am in complete control of what comes out of my mouth and what I say and what I don't say. And I certainly meant what I said. And if he didn't want to be here, he could take his ball and he can go home. Or actually, I said he could get the F out. I meant it then. And when he said what he said to the Raw magazine, he meant that as well. And since then, we broke bread. We did what we had to do to make sure that we weren't going to let any personal conflicts involved with business. Anyway, so we've solved that. Can't wait for this Monday. It's going to be off the hook, guaranteed.
After solving the issue behind the scenes to move on to business, March 3rd in the most hyped Raw show in months saw Austin making his TV return for the first time since walking out on the company, leading to the hyped Rock Austin confrontation in their first interaction on television in almost a year to set up their match at WrestleMania 19, leading to Raw spiking big to a 4.5 rating, the highest rated program since the first WWE Raw show in May 2002, with the Rock Austin promo confrontation and following brawl jumping big to a 5.4 rating, the highest rated segment on Raw in almost a year and the highest rated segment of 2003 overall. Continuing the build-up to the event with both acknowledging that it might be the final match between them, which saw Rock getting his win back on Austin at WrestleMania in his retirement match while thanking him in the ring in an end of an era moment to the greatest boom period the industry has ever seen. As a day after the match, Rock came out to a massive babyface reaction for a Rock Appreciation Night in the main event, bringing out Bill Goldberg making his debut to start the build-up to the match in a segment peaking the night with a 4.2 rating. As with Rock and Goldberg in contact since first meeting in 1999, Rock organized the crucial Goldberg-McMahon meeting in early January to lead to his signing. with the match originally set to headline WrestleMania 19 until being delayed a month due to contract negotiations taking longer than expected, with Goldberg visiting Rock on the set of the Rundown movie late last year in preparation for their upcoming planned feud with Rock, drawing the highest-rated segment on every show on the way to the Backlash pay-per-view, with the biggest coming on April 21st for the second Rock concert in Goldberg's hometown of Atlanta, jumping huge with Raw's biggest viewership gain in over a year of over 1.2 million viewers to Raw's highest-rated segment in over a month, 4.7 rating.
In fact, whether Goldberg should or should not come to WWE, why he hasn't.
Do I think he should come to the WWE? Absolutely. I absolutely feel like he should. But again, that's completely up to him, and it's up to Vince and what kind of deal that they can strike. I think with a guy in his position, with the career that he's had within the short time that he's had it, you know, if there was any sort of exodus that he might feel like he deserves, it would have to happen up here. And I've been doing all I possibly could to arrange things and phone calls and meetings and things like that.
What was the final deal that got you here? What finally brought you to WWE?
You know, Rock had a lot to do with it. You know, he and I go way back, but the fact is that for me to get back on the scene, I got to go for numero uno, the #1 entertainer in this business.
Who better than to get beat by than the absolute greatest the wrestling industry has ever seen?
Austin returned a day after Backlash as a surprise to close Raw as the new general manager alongside Bischoff in a segment gaining over 800,000 viewers to a 4.6 rating, and largely alongside Goldberg stayed Raw's highest drawing performer for the rest of the year, with the next time both Rock and Austin appeared on the same show was on June 2nd in what ended up Rock's final appearance in the Hollywood Rock heel run, with Rock after raising the bar through every stage of his career doing it again, with Hollywood Rock putting on some of the most naturally charismatic showmanship performances ever seen on wrestling television to again for the countless time cement himself as a performer on another level, officially turning back babyface in a segment with Jericho and Christian after the crowd pretty much already turned him a few promos into the run, as Rock's segment in the highlight reel with Christian and Jericho picked up over 900,000 viewers to the peak of the night 4.5 rating, with the next time Rock made an appearance on Raw being on December 8, coming out as a surprise to one of the biggest reactions in Raw history to start the build to the reunion of the Rock and Sock connection as his return match for WrestleMania 20 in a segment doing the peak of the night 4.6 rating, with the last time in 2003 that Austin and Rock would indirectly go head-to-head coming in different circumstances on a Best of 2003 Raw on December 22nd. Showing both the Austin vs. Bischoff No Way Out and Rock vs. Goldberg Backlash matches on TV, with the Rock-Goldberg match placed early in the first hour doing a 3.2 rating, which ended up the highest rated segment on the show.